Hello and welcome to Recap Radio. I'm Diego Cupolo, editor-in-chief of Turkey Recap, and this is our live show about Turkish politics and foreign policy. Today I'm talking to Arife Köse, a PhD researcher at the University of East Anglia. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
That's in the UK. And Arife is also a frequent commentator on the state of democracy in Turkey. Thanks, Arife, for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me, Diego.
I should mention this is your second appearance on Recap Radio. The first one got lost to the internet. I promise that won't happen again this time, and you'll see this recording online afterwards. In this webcast that will last on the internet, that will be on the internet afterwards, we're going to discuss the crackdown on Turkey's main opposition party, how they're responding, and what we can expect next. People listening to us live are welcome to send questions, and we hope to talk between 30 and 40 minutes. So, Arife, to provide some context, the main opposition Republican People's Party, the CHP, held an internal election known as a Extraordinary Party Congress on Sunday, September 21st, 2 days ago. In it, they re-elected the party chair, Özgür Özel. The move is seen as an attempt to protect Özel's leadership against allegations of vote rigging and corruption that could see him unseated by court order. The next court date in basically this trial that's going against the CHP leadership, the next court date is set for October 24th. And some observers fear Özel will be replaced by the former CHP chair, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who's not very popular after losing many elections in his 13-year tenure. So how do you see recent developments within the CHP? And does Sunday's Congress fortify Özel's leadership as intended?
Okay, well, like every question about Turkey, this is not also easy and, direct. There is no direct answer. There is no yes and no answer to this question as well. So I think it's important to begin with a context that goes back to 2023 presidential elections, because there are two processes going on at the same time and they are intertwined. And it's important to understand how they are intertwined and why. So there was a presidential election in Turkey in 2023. Kılıçdaroğlu was the opposition's candidate and he lost the election against Erdogan. Then in November, same year, the opposition party CHP held a congress to choose a new leader because the change movement within the party led by Ekrem İmamoğlu wanted to change leadership. And in that congress in November 23, Kılıçdaroğlu lost the leadership race and Özgür Özel became the head of the party. So this was the first critical move that has led to what's going on in Turkey at the moment. And the second critical thing that happened was the local elections in March 2024. In these local elections, for the first time, CHP became first by getting 37.8% of the vote share, and AKP, Erdogan's party, became second by getting around, I think, 35% of the vote share. This happened for the first time in AKP's more than 20 years rule. So it was a big turning point for Turkish politics. Besides, in these local elections in 2024, CHP won 14 big municipalities, including Ankara and Istanbul, like İmamoğlu's city. So this was a really big defeat for Erdogan, who is very sensitive about municipalities, winning municipalities, local elections, and the local organization of the party. So then he decided that this, İmamoğlu and Özgür Özel together, they are posing a challenge to his rule, and they need to go. This opposition has the chance to win against Erdogan. This was the background, but then in the meantime, because the Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu fraction lost the election in the Congress, a couple of people filed complaints about the irregularities about the Congress. This is why Erdogan keeps saying, oh, it's the CHP people themselves who made the complaints. This is true, but this was because of CHP's internal conflict. And then in March 2025, Ekrem İmamoğlu was arrested. Ekrem İmamoğlu was arrested. And after that, dozens of opposition mayors were also arrested. They are in prison now. I don't really know the number. I can't really.
I think it's about 15 now.
Yeah, it's about 15. But the problem is these people are some of CHP's best cadres, like best people who are, who are ruling the party. So probably the best cadres of CHP are in prison now. And then, as you said, we have a trial in 24 October, and there's a possibility that the leadership of the CHP can be replaced by a trustee appointed by the regime. Is it possible? I mean, technically, as far as I can see, and as far as I read all the comments and everything from legal experts, I'm not a legal expert, but as far as I can see from the comments of the legal expert, this is not possible anymore. This shouldn't be possible anymore. Because CHP also took some steps to prevent this happening. Like, for instance, they didn't let Istanbul delegates to vote in the Congress because Istanbul Congress is also challenged by the regime, and there's a trial going on about Istanbul Congress as well. So they didn't let Istanbul delegates to vote, etc., etc. So they took some measures to prevent this happening. So it should be fine. But of course, we don't know, because the problem is not only that whether Özgür Özel can be replaced by a trustee or not, etc. But the main problem is the way that the regime tries to design the opposition. So this I am saying this because this means that they may not replace Özgür Özel with a trustee, but then they won't stop. They will keep trying other things. For instance, just this morning there was another operation against Ankara municipality, for instance. So they keep doing all this stuff anyway. So I don't know. Technically, Özgür Özel should be safe now. It should be okay, but we don't know. So,
and this also has international implications, right? Because there's many governments that are pushing oppositions down through legal measures. Can you talk a little bit about how this applies for oppositions elsewhere in the world, and maybe what lessons they can take from Turkey?
Yeah, exactly. What you are saying is very true and very important, actually, because, for instance, if you think about the US, the way that Trump threatens Mamdani at the moment, it can take the form of what Erdogan is doing in Turkey. If Mamdani wins the mayoral election in New York in November this year, for instance, he can be faced with same kind of assault, because like authoritarians learn from each other, right? Trump does what Erdogan does what Orban does. So they learn from each other. So it's important to discuss all these things with international implications as well, really. But I think there is a shift in Erdogan's way of authoritarian governance. So Turkey has been labeled as competitive authoritarian country so far, which is to say that there are elections, but they are not fair because, for instance, opposition cannot find enough space in media outlets, and it can't get enough finance from state resources for its election campaigns, etc., etc. So competitive authoritarianism usually focuses on how elections are organized in an unfair way, but they still exist. But the problem with those leaders like Erdogan, Trump, Orban is that they come to power through elections. And this is where they get their legitimacy. So they can say that, look, people elected us. We are not here through any coup or something like that, but we are elected by the people. This is their biggest source of legitimacy. So they need this legitimacy. But at the same time, they need to prevent others to win elections. This is the biggest problem for those leaders. So what Erdogan does is a kind of solution to this problem, actually. So instead of designing the election, he decided to design the opposition.
Which is what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we are seeing right now. So instead of designing elections, he's designing the opposition so that there is still opposition, there are still elections, but he can still win the elections without damaging his legitimacy. This is what he is trying to do now. And also, if I have time, there are two more points which is important. But of course, when he is doing this, he is facing a big legitimacy problem. No one believes in Turkey that Imamoğlu is in prison because he's corrupt. Everyone thinks that he's in prison because he's going to win the next presidential election. So first, he is forcing CHP, the main opposition party, to having to respond to several crises at the same time, like legal crisis, like internal conflict, etc. So CHP has to respond to several crises at the same time. And also, the regime is forcing the opposition to get drowned in its internal conflicts and division. But this is not a simple design, Diego. This is the key point about Turkey, but maybe it can have implications for other regimes as well. Because, people who knows Turkish politics, I'm sure they know this very well. But the impression among Turkish people about CHP is that, first of all, CHP is not a party to govern Turkey. Yes, it's an opposition. It's good at opposing the governments and etc. But CHP never governs Turkey. So this is the first impression. And the second impression about CHP is that it is the party of internal conflicts. It has always divisions, fractions, and etc. So because of those two reasons, Turkish people, it is, there's an impression Turkish people think that CHP cannot run Turkey. It is incapable of governing Turkey. And Erdogan is now playing with those two common places about CHP by keep forcing it into internal divisions, and by having by forcing it to respond to several crises at the same time. So yeah.
And it also keeps the party off balance, right? Because instead of talking about policies or working on municipal issues like building metros, they're talking about this crackdown that they're facing and how to work with the trials. And on a split screen, if you're watching television, Erdogan is in New York talking to world leaders while CHP is in court, right? And this makes them look weak visually, even if you don't follow politics and you're just an observer of what you see on television at the bar, right?
Like many people. Yeah, exactly.
So my next question would be, how do you think the CHP has responded so far? Because Özgür Özel has had rallies since March on a weekly basis. He yells, people show up. There seems to be organic support for him. How do you rate that response, and what can opposition parties do in CHP's position? Because it does seem like judicial pressure is nonstop on Turkey's opposition right now.
Yeah, exactly. So if I continue where I left, so we said, the party has to produce solutions to several crises at the same time. This is a big problem for the party anyway. And I think on this, they are doing fairly well. I don't know what else you can do when you are under attack from several fronts at the same time. This is a really very tricky and very difficult situation. And in terms of legal and technical process, I think they are doing fairly well. They are doing their best to prevent all sorts of legal problems for the party and for the leadership, despite internal conflicts and internal divisions, because also managing them also so difficult because it's a very delicate situation. You need to manage these internal problems without really damaging the party, because this is what the regime is waiting for, really. So it is a very delicate process for the CHP, and they are doing fairly good, I think. And second,
go ahead.
Oh no, and I was going to say, like, second, in the meantime, Özgür Özel is trying not to lose the momentum among the Turkish population. Like, they keep organizing rallies every week in Istanbul and in somewhere I think on Wednesdays in Istanbul and in the weekend somewhere in Anatolia. This is also extraordinary performance as well. I mean, if CHP has organized more than 50 rallies so far. And this wasn't something that the regime was expecting to happen after Imamoğlu's arrest. So this is also kind of extraordinary performance for CHP. Yes.
Yeah, so I would say that the image of people attending those rallies, if you see it on TV, if it's covered on TV, if you see, on the internet, images of Özel speaking regularly to many people, that also counteracts the pressure that the CHP is facing. What I'm wondering is these congresses and this kind of like legal battle that the CHP is in, it seems like the rules change in Turkey very often. Rule of law, we've kind of lost that a long time ago, if we can be objective about it. So if you're trying to defeat the incumbent party through legal avenues and the laws keep changing, I'm wondering what these congresses that the CHP's pursuing, what do they serve? Because I could see them energizing the base and adding legitimacy to Özel's leadership.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Is that the way to look at it? Like, even though we don't have rule of law, the fact that people are showing up and we're having these congresses and these votes add a layer of legitimacy to this opposition party that's under siege, basically.
Probably, yes. Because, they are renewing the party managements in several municipalities and the leadership. And also the party is going to have another ordinary Congress this year in November as well. So this was the Congress last week was an extraordinary Congress just because of the trial on 24th of October to prevent all these, trustee problem and etc. But the party is going to have another Congress this year in November. And in the extraordinary Congress, in his speech, Özgür Özel said they are preparing a program to explain people that CHP is ready to govern the entire, the Turkey, the country. It has its foreign policy, economic policy, etc. So he is kind of trying to shift the debate to policies and Turkey's problems instead of getting drowned in all these legal, etc. attacks. So I think he's aware of this situation, but it is not easy to navigate between all these things, really. But this is what CHP is trying to do. So yes, in a way, you are right. I mean, it might kind of energize the voter base and it might increase Özel's legitimacy. But I don't think Özel has a legitimacy problem anyway, because according to the latest poll by Konda, it's one of the most credible, polling companies in Turkey. According to the latest poll, 69% of Turkish electorate thinks that Özgür Özel should be head of the CHP anyway. I am not just talking about CHP electorate. I'm talking about the entire Turkish entire electorate in Turkey. So, but I think I see these congresses as a way of preventing legal problems. So they are kind of renewing and they are getting rid of all the, kind of possible problems and et cetera, et cetera. But the main question for CHP is how to turn this mobilization into a more permanent base for CHP in a way that lets CHP to win the next election and govern the country. This is the main question. And for this, I mean, it's always easy to talk about these things, but as far as I know politics, and Erdogan knows this very well, for instance, it has to strengthen its local base. Like every village, every small province in Turkey CHP needs to have a strong organization with a strong connection with the party. Because people can go to the rallies, and I am sure they are committed, because they are worried about democracy in Turkey, etc., etc. But the question is how to turn this into a permanent base for CHP, like members, being members of the party, not just going to the rallies, but also working for the party in the elections and etc. This is the main question. So I think these congresses might be helpful for this if there are, people ready to work for the party. And it is important not just inviting the rallies, but it is very important to open up the party to people. Like all the party channels, they should be opened up to the people. They should be including people and including them in the discussions, not just rallies. Let's include them in the it would be, for instance, great to create local channels where people come together and discuss all these things and etc. So it might, sometimes opposition is about being creative. You need to be creative when you are under such an assault.
Yeah. And tomorrow we also have an Istanbul provincial congress, we should mention.
Yeah.
And, CHP's presidential candidate is in jail, Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, which we need to mention in all this talk. So in trying to gather that momentum from the base, there are so many legal and difficult issues there if your main candidate is in jail. What I'm wondering is what's the role of the international community, international governments? Because Erdogan, while Imamoğlu is in jail and this is all happening, there's this Congress tomorrow in Istanbul. Erdogan's in the US. He's going to meet Trump on Thursday, September 25th. And they're supposed to discuss different deals. What do you think? Is it the international community's obligation to speak out, or is this basically on Turkish citizens? Because right now we're in a complicated global situation with Ukraine and Israel wars. Turkey has Turkish domestic politics are not number one on a lot of people's lists. So how do you see that dynamic?
I find it always difficult to answer this question, but I think, so there is one thing we need to understand, that it's not job of international communities to protect democracy in Turkey. International communities is it's concerned with international things, international affairs. So long as they get along with Erdogan well about the issues like Ukraine or Middle East, the best. I live in the UK, and then I can say that the UK is not going to do anything about democracy in Turkey, and we shouldn't be really expecting this. They have their own problems first. Second, as I said, international community. So they are not really, worried about this kind of but I think here the more important question is why Erdogan needs international community. For instance, why he organized this secret meeting with Trump's son, and then now he is having this meeting with Trump at a very critical conjuncture in Turkish politics. This is a more important question than what international community is going to do about democracy in Turkey, because as you said, Erdogan needs international community to use. He usually uses international politics as a leverage to consolidate his authoritarian rule in Turkey anyway. So international community might be working, to consolidate his authoritarian rule more than democracy, actually. Because the thing is that Erdogan can say, I am the great leader and I am doing politics on the global level. Look at CHP. CHP is just busy with its internal problems and internal conflicts, but I am a world leader. This is also an excuse for him to justify the suffering in the country because of economy and other problems. This is also what happens in China and Russia too. Not China maybe, but in Russia, economy is really bad. But then the country is in a war and Vladimir Putin is a world leader. So yeah, we might be suffering inside the country, but it is worth, because we are running we are running the world, or we are running the Middle East. We are doing great things in Syria, in other countries. So we might, but it's okay. So what I mean is, I don't, especially now when his internal legitimacy is decreasing, he needs international community more than ever. But the unfortunate thing is, this international committee is a person like Trump, unfortunately, which is a big problem, really.
Yeah. And I mean, so many directions to go. I'm just going to go to more forward-looking assessments. We have ongoing court cases for the CHP leadership. There's more cases than I can count against CHP members. What, at the same time, you have this peace process with the PKK that's led by the state. Parliament will reopen next week on October 1st. What do you see looking ahead? Do you have, I know that it's hard to speculate, but what are you watching out for to understand where Turkish politics is headed, basically, in this near term, in this fall session?
Yeah, this is, I think, another really difficult question. But I think my first answer to this question is I can't. The problem with Turkish politics at the moment, it's impossible to look ahead. You can't look ahead, really. It is really difficult to know what's going to happen. Yeah, there is a peace process with Kurd, but I don't really know what's going on here. There is a commission in the parliament, but what is this commission really doing apart from listening various sections of society? This is important, but we don't really know what's going on in the peace process, because it's incredibly untransparent, and it's just between basically PKK and the Turkish state, basically. So the social aspect of this peace process is incredibly weak. So we don't know what's going on here, but I don't know. I can just speculate, but I think it's better not to speculate. But maybe I can just emphasize one thing, that this is the main problem with Turkish politics at the moment. We can't talk about the real problems of the country, like economy, or like peace process, for instance. It's all of us, it's our problem, or I don't know, or several other problems of the country, because of regime's way of doing politics, we got stuck in this ongoing existential crisis. What's going on between the regime and the opposition is like a war at the moment. And it's an existential war. So this is the only point where people in Turkey is involving in or participating in politics at the moment. Yeah, they talk about economy and etc., but no one really talked about what are the solutions, what are the policies, what's wrong with the policies, because we are facing a regime who doesn't recognize the opposition as a legitimate opposition. And so it is really difficult to talk about Turkish politics, because we are facing a regime which tries to eliminate politics from politics. Really, he wants a politics without politics. This is what the regime is trying to do. So I don't want to speculate, really, Diego. So this is
So you don't know who the next president is going to be?
No, I don't know.
Who's going to follow Erdogan? No idea.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, to keep it going, this momentum that Özel has built, we got a question about basically how do you keep the opposition, people who are coming out in the streets, who are showing up, how do you keep them motivated to keep showing up? And maybe you talked about it a little bit before by having this Congress in November and spelling out the party program, which as a journalist in Turkey, I do feel like the opposition party's program has always been vague. Like they've never, and they say that we don't want to be copied. Then the government will just do what we say. But honestly, like at some point, you need to make your policies clear, offer an alternative, maybe that's a way to do it. What do you think? Because so far it is very emotional reaction that we are not going to take this. And I understand that that's good. But what do you do moving forward, basically, is the question to keep the opposition alive in Turkey? What do you do in competitive authoritarian governments?
No, exactly. This is the key point, really, because I mean, although CHP has been reacting very well so far, if this doesn't turn into a kind of policy or a new program or finding a new way to motivate people, it's a reaction. And this opened up this. So what has been so far in Turkey is that this crackdown by the regime has opened up a bigger space for the opposition to do politics. So CHP could have gone beyond its normal limits. Now it has a chance to, to be party of bigger than its normal base. This is an opportunity for the opposition. However, for this to happen, it needs more than rallies. And also how long can you keep doing those rallies? I mean, so even so far it has been great, but there's a limit. For this, and it's not just that there is a limit, and also this doesn't stop the regime. This is the bigger problem. Imamoğlu is still in prison. Dozens of mayors are still in prison. Every day, the regime is having another operation again municipalities. So if the question is how to stop the regime, then you need to do more than this. And the first thing might be what you said, to develop policies, to respond to countries' real problems, and to convince people that you are the party who can do all these policies. But there is one problem here that we haven't talked about it, and it is that this government, this regime, is using all sorts of measures to stop all these things happening. So as CHP wants to turn politics into a normal business, normal stuff, I am sure the Erdogan regime is going to try to turn into a crisis, because authoritarian regimes, they need crisis. They can only exist through crisis, right? So they will keep creating crisis to pull CHP into those existential things. And also it has all the, oppressive tools in their hands. Like they keep putting people in prison, they keep threatening people, and they keep transferring other mayors from other parties. So far, I think it was 15 or something like that. And yesterday I read Erdogan is planning to transfer 100 mayors from other parties. So, he's planning lots of things at the same time. And again, I mean, my biggest solution, there is no easy solution. This is a very, very difficult and very delicate process. But I think it is still the only, I mean, if you remember how Erdogan survived from all these existential attacks against him in the past, you see that it was because of people. So you need to strengthen your local party organizations. This is the only way, I think, to, but it's not easy. It's really very difficult and delicate process.
Yeah. And maybe it will come down to the economic factors, right? Because a lot of that support, and it's very transactional, some party relations, right? In Turkey, for all parties, people who support parties get direct benefits, jobs, financial, welfare support. So maybe when the AKP can't provide those, there will be a change. But until then, I'm just going to keep doing this podcast and hope that we can continue to have free speech, because as you see it in the US, it is quite bad. Let me see. We got one final question. I'm pretty likely to continue. Let me see. I'm basically asking about the peace process. Sorry, I can't read this on my phone and it's not working on my computer. It's basically asking that the pressure on the Dem party seems to have eased. Is this likely to continue? as long as the peace
The peace
process
process.
goes on? Yeah. Do you expect Dem Party to basically be spared the worst of the judicial harassment as long as the peace process is ongoing?
I mean, as I said, I don't know because peace process is very untransparent, and I don't know really what's going on. And again, it's a very delicate issue, and also it's obviously, as someone from Turkey, my priority is, Kurdish people has been suffering for such a long time now. So despite everything, of course, I want peace process to be successful and finally this war ends. But maybe the more important thing here is how Erdogan uses this peace process again to corner the opposition. Because what he's doing is really he's preventing CHP to collaborate with other opposition parties. And of course, Dem Party is one of the most important, maybe the most important one in Turkey. So with this peace process, apart from their plans in the Middle East and etc., they are also preventing a deeper collaboration between CHP and Dem Party. And we will see what's going to happen next days, because it also, because there are sometimes statements from Dem Party people saying that nothing is really going on in the nothing substantial is really going on in the peace process. So they are complaining about it. Sometimes Bahçeli is making statements about it and inviting Erdogan to take a step, because peace process cannot be about just one party laying down the arms, but the other parties should also be doing other things. But we don't know what Turkish state is doing about peace process really. So it depends on all these things. But I think, for instance, CHP has been managing well so far with its relationship with the Dem Party. Always with respect, but without not waiting too much from Dem Party. So there is a kind of still relationship between them. And then whenever CHP gets a bigger attack, Dem Party always makes a statement of supporting CHP and about democracy and etc. So it's good that there's a kind of relationship going on between them. But of course, this has its natural limits, and this is how it is. So everyone needs to do politics on, by considering all these. I hope it has been, I hope it sucks, it becomes successful, but I don't know really. And yeah.
And just to add a footnote, there's some pro-Kurdish mayors that ran under CHP ticket under the urban consensus, which are also in jail. So I think that there's a lot of overlap in who's getting punished right now. And I think that what's getting punished is cooperation, to put it bluntly, right? You don't want the opposition parties to cooperate.
Yeah, exactly. This is the main point. Yeah, and so far I think it's fine, but let's see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for people who joined late. I've been talking to Arife Köse, a PhD researcher at University of East Anglia. That's a strange word for
East
me.
Anglia,
sorry.
that's true.
Thank you for joining and doing this, Arife. And thank you to our listeners. If you missed part of this live show, you can find the full recording on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. I'll also provide links to the articles or anything we mentioned in this talk. This podcast is a production of Turkey Recap and my cell phone. Turkey Recap is a newsletter on Turkish politics, foreign affairs, and business. Visit turkeyrecap.com for more coverage from right here in Ankara. Stay safe, stay well. Glad talking to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.